They said it could not be seen, they said it could not be touched, they said it could not be stopped. For nearly 2 decades, one machine ruled the night skies in complete secrecy, a weapon so advanced that its very existence rewrote the rules of modern warfare. This was not a fighter built for dogfights. It did not rely on speed, agility, or brute force. Instead, it relied on something far more terrifying: invisibility. The F-117 Nighthawk was the world's first operational stealth aircraft, a flying contradiction. Sharp angles, flat surfaces, no curves, no elegance, and yet it was one of the most destructive precision weapons ever created. While enemy radar systems searched blindly through the sky, the F-117 slipped through untouched, carrying laser-guided bombs directly to the most heavily defended targets on Earth: nuclear bunkers, command centers, radar installations, air defense hubs, targets that no other aircraft could reach. During the Gulf War, it flew less than 3% of all coalition missions, yet struck nearly 40% of the most critical targets. Not a single one was lost, not a single one was damaged. The message was clear: the age of stealth had begun, and with it, a dangerous myth was born. That stealth meant invincibility. Night after night, the F-117 emerged from hidden hangars, launched under cover of darkness, and disappeared into hostile airspace. Enemy radar screens stayed silent. Missile operators waited in fear. Pilots never knew what hit them, only that something had. Entire air defense networks collapsed without ever seeing their attacker. To the world, the F-117 became more than an aircraft. It became a ghost, a shadow, a weapon beyond reach. But every machine, no matter how advanced, has a weakness. And in 1999, during a war few expected would challenge American air power, that weakness was exposed. On a cold March night over the Balkans, an F-117 lifted off on what should have been a routine strike mission. The aircraft followed familiar routes, familiar timing, familiar confidence. Below, an enemy waited, not with cutting-edge technology, but with decades-old equipment, patience, and an understanding of human behavior. They knew the stealth jet would come. They knew when it would come, and they knew where it would fly. For just a few seconds, radar systems flickered to life. Enough time, a missile rose into the darkness. The unthinkable happened. The invisible aircraft was hit. Flames erupted in the night sky as the world's most secret warplane fell toward the Earth. Wreckage scattered across farmland. Pieces of stealth technology, once guarded behind layers of classification, lay exposed in the open. The ghost had been brought down. For the first time in history, a stealth aircraft had been destroyed in combat. The pilot survived, the mission failed, and the myth of invincibility was shattered. But the story did not end with the crash. Because what happened next, what was found, collected, studied, and quietly shared, would change global military technology forever. The machine that was never supposed to be seen had now been lost behind enemy lines, and soon it would be found. The explosion in the night sky lasted only seconds, but its consequences would echo for decades. As the F-117 fell from the clouds, its pilot ejected into the darkness, drifting silently toward the ground while fragments of the aircraft scattered across the Serbian countryside. What had once been one of the most protected machines on Earth was now broken apart, exposed, and vulnerable. For the first time, stealth had failed. Villagers heard the impact before they saw the wreckage. Burning debris lit up fields and farmland. Metallic fragments, strange, angular, unfamiliar, lay half buried in the soil. Some pieces were still warm, others were twisted beyond recognition. Within hours, Yugoslav forces sealed off the crash area, but they were not alone. Word spread quickly. This was not a normal aircraft. This was something different, something priceless. The F-117 had not simply crashed. It had been lost behind enemy lines. American recovery teams scrambled. Satellites scanned the region. Surveillance aircraft circled at a distance, but the political reality was clear. Direct recovery was impossible. Any attempt to retrieve the wreckage by force risked escalation, international backlash, and open conflict. Time was running out. On the ground, soldiers and intelligence officers moved fast. Every piece of debris mattered: radar-absorbent panels, avionics fragments, coatings designed to scatter radar waves. components that had never been seen outside classified facilities. Some pieces were secured by the military, others disappeared. Local civilians collected fragments as souvenirs, some hid them, some sold them, some turned them over. In the chaos following the crash, the most advanced stealth technology in the world leaked into the open, one fragment at a time. And then came the quiet visitors. Intelligence agencies from around the world were watching closely. This was a once-in-a-generation opportunity. For years, stealth technology had been studied only in theory. Now it lay shattered on foreign soil. Reports later suggested that parts of the aircraft were examined, photographed, cataloged, and quietly shared. Engineers studied the shapes, scientists analyzed the materials, military planners took notes, not to copy it exactly, but to understand it, how it bent radar waves, how it reflected under certain angles, how it could be tracked briefly when conditions were right. The F-117 had been built to defeat radar. Now radar was learning how to defeat stealth. Within days, the remaining wreckage was removed from the crash site. What could not be transported was destroyed. What could be hidden was hidden. The field where the aircraft fell returned to silence, but the damage was already done. The loss of the F-117 was not just a tactical failure, it was a psychological shock. For the first time, the United States had to confront a new reality, that even its most advanced weapons were not untouchable. Stealth no longer meant invisible. It meant vulnerable under the right conditions. Officially, the incident was downplayed. One aircraft lost, one pilot rescued, mission complete, but behind closed doors, the implications were studied with urgency. Flight patterns were reviewed, mission planning was rewritten, assumptions were challenged. And quietly, the future of the F-117 was already being questioned. The aircraft would continue to fly for several more years. It would complete missions. It would remain effective. But the era of absolute dominance was over. The ghost had been seen. Eventually, the F-117 fleet was withdrawn from frontline service, officially retired, parked in remote desert hangars under heavy guard. Some believed the aircraft was gone forever. But the story of the Nighthawk was not finished. Because years later, fragments of that lost aircraft, pieces once scattered across a battlefield, would resurface in unexpected places. Museums, archives, declassified footage, and from the lessons learned from its fall, something new would rise, a new generation of stealth, more advanced, more lethal, and far more dangerous. The F-117 had been lost, but its legacy was only beginning. For a long time, the world was told very little. Official statements were brief, controlled, carefully worded. One aircraft lost, pilot recovered, no further details. The incident faded from headlines, replaced by new conflicts and new crises. But beneath the surface, the wreckage of the fallen stealth aircraft was beginning a second, quieter journey. Not through the sky, but through laboratories, intelligence briefings, and classified research centers. Pieces of the aircraft did not simply vanish. They were collected, cataloged, and preserved, jagged fragments of black composite material, sections of wing edges, panels once coated with radar-absorbent compounds. Every shard told a story. Engineers studied the geometry, the sharp angles that had once confused radar waves. Scientists examined the materials layer by layer, testing how they absorbed, scattered, and reflected electromagnetic signals. The goal was not imitation, it was understanding. How had something designed to be unseen been detected, tracked, and destroyed? The answer lay not in a single failure, but in a chain of small vulnerabilities. Stealth worked best when it remained unpredictable, when flight paths varied, when timing changed, when assumptions were challenged. But on that night in 1999, routine had replaced caution. The wreckage confirmed what theorists had long suspected. Stealth was not invisibility. It was a balance, a trade-off. A narrow margin between being hidden and being exposed. As years passed, more details slowly emerged. Photographs appeared, first grainy, then clearer. Sections of the aircraft displayed behind glass, a twisted fuselage panel, a wing fragment bearing unmistakable angular lines. The once mythical machine had become a physical object again, something that could be touched, measured, explained. To the public, these images were shocking. To engineers and military planners, they were invaluable. The fall of the F-117 became a case study taught in Air Force academies and defense institutions around the world, not as a failure, but as a lesson in complacency, a lesson in adaptation, a lesson in the limits of technology. Meanwhile, inside classified hangars thousands of miles away, the remaining fleet sat quietly, black silhouettes under dim lights, maintained, protected, but rarely discussed. Officially, the aircraft was nearing the end of its service life. Newer platforms were entering development. More advanced stealth designs were on the horizon, smoother shapes, blended surfaces, smarter systems, but none of them would exist without the Nighthawk. Every improvement traced its lineage back to that faceted, angular machine. The loss had forced innovation. Stealth coatings became more durable, radar warning systems more sensitive, mission planning more dynamic. Aircraft no longer relied on shape alone. They learned to sense, adapt, and respond in real time. In a strange way, the destruction of the F-117 made future stealth aircraft far more dangerous than anything that came before it. The wreckage also altered global perceptions. Nations that once believed American stealth technology was untouchable now knew it could be challenged. Air defense systems evolved. Detection methods diversified. Warfare entered a new phase, one defined by counter-stealth and electronic warfare. The ghost had been revealed, and once revealed, it could never return to the shadows in the same way. Eventually, the F-117 was officially retired. Public ceremonies marked its departure. Statements praised its service, its victories, its role in shaping modern warfare. But behind those words lay a quieter truth. The aircraft was not retired because it failed. It was retired because the world it created had moved beyond it. Yet even in retirement, the Nighthawk refused to disappear completely. Long after it was said to be grounded, sightings began to emerge. Reports of black aircraft flying at night, test flights, training missions, silent passes over restricted airspace. The lost machine was still flying, still teaching, still shaping the future. Because what had been found in a Serbian field did not mark the end of the F-117's story. It marked the beginning of something far greater. The wreckage was gone, the aircraft was retired, and yet the F-117 was never truly finished. What had been lost in a foreign field was not rebuilt in metal, it was restored in knowledge. Every fragment recovered, every failure analyzed, every assumption challenged became part of a new blueprint, not for resurrecting the Nighthawk itself, but for transforming what stealth would become. The F-117 had proven something revolutionary. That shape could defeat radar, that precision could replace brute force, that a single aircraft flying alone at night could do the work of entire formations, but it had also revealed its limits. It was slow, it was fragile, and once its patterns were understood, it could be predicted. The next generation would not make those mistakes. Deep inside defense laboratories and restricted design bureaus, engineers began to rethink stealth from the ground up, no longer as a single trick, but as a layered system. Shape was no longer enough. Future aircraft would blend curves and angles, reducing radar returns from every direction, not just the front. Materials would evolve, absorbing a wider range of frequencies. Sensors would become smarter, warning pilots before detection ever occurred. And most importantly, stealth would no longer operate alone. The F-117 flew blind by design. It carried no radar of its own, relying on pre-planned routes and external intelligence. That choice had once protected it from detection, but it had also limited its awareness. The future demanded something different, aircraft that could see without being seen, track threats without revealing themselves, adapt mid-mission instead of following fixed paths. The loss of the Nighthawk accelerated this transformation. Lessons learned from its destruction reshaped mission planning doctrine. Stealth aircraft would now vary routes constantly. Timing would change, patterns would be avoided at all costs. Complacency would never again be allowed to creep into invisibility. Even as the F-117 fleet was officially retired, it did not disappear. Stored in remote desert facilities, the aircraft remained airworthy, maintained, protected, occasionally flown. Not for combat, but for education. Pilots trained against it. Radar operators tested systems on it. Engineers measured how newer sensors interacted with its aging design. The once feared warplane became a living test subject, a benchmark against which all future stealth would be measured. In this quiet role, the F-117 may have been more valuable than it ever was in war, because every weakness discovered in the Nighthawk was eliminated in its successors. Stealth aircraft that followed would be faster, stronger, multi-role, capable of air-to-air combat, electronic warfare, and deep strike missions all at once. They would not rely on darkness alone. They would dominate day and night, and they would be nearly impossible to track for more than a fleeting moment. The crash in 1999 did not end the era of stealth, it refined it. The ghost that fell from the sky had taught the world how to hunt invisibility, and in doing so had forced invisibility to evolve. What emerged from that evolution was something far more dangerous than the F-117 ever was. Aircraft that carried the lessons of failure within their very structure. Aircraft that would not repeat the same mistakes. Aircraft that could disappear again not because they were misunderstood, but because they were truly beyond reach. The Nighthawk had been lost. Its wreckage had been found, its secrets had been studied, and from those secrets a new generation was born, one that would inherit its legacy without inheriting its fate. The F-117 was never meant to be eternal. It was built for a moment in history, a narrow window where secrecy, surprise, and technological imbalance could reshape the battlefield overnight. And for years it did exactly that, but warfare never stands still. As the world studied the fall of the Nighthawk, new machines quietly took its place. Aircraft that carried its DNA but none of its limitations. Stealth no longer belonged to a single, fragile platform. It became a system, a philosophy, a foundation for modern air power. Where the F-117 had been a specialist, its successors became predators. They could strike deep like the Nighthawk, but also defend themselves. They could adapt mid-mission. They could gather intelligence, jam enemy defenses, and coordinate with other aircraft without ever revealing their position. They learned from the night the ghost was shot down. Every sharp angle that once defined the F-117 was refined. Every vulnerability was redesigned. Every assumption was challenged. Stealth was no longer about being unseen. It was about controlling what the enemy could perceive. And in that evolution, the F-117 became something rare in military history. A weapon that was surpassed but never made irrelevant. Even today, decades after its first flight, the Nighthawk still flies, quietly, far from cameras, far from conflict, used as a training adversary, a research platform, a reminder of where stealth began. The aircraft that once terrified entire air defense networks now teaches new generations how to survive them. Wreckage, once scattered across a foreign field, is now preserved behind museum glass, not as a symbol of failure, but as proof that even the most powerful machines can fall and still change the world. The F-117 did not lose its legacy the night it was shot down. It earned it, because history is not shaped only by what survives, but by what forces the world to adapt. The ghost that was never supposed to be seen was seen. The machine that was never supposed to fall did fall. And in doing so, it transformed modern warfare forever. Long after the radar screens went dark, long after the wreckage was cleared, the shadow of the Nighthawk still remains. If you enjoyed this documentary, make sure to subscribe for more stories about lost, forgotten, and rediscovered war machines. Leave a comment below where you're watching from, and tell us which war machine should we uncover next.